right now, as you listen to this, 75% of people who are quitting their jobs aren't actually leaving because of the commute
Right.
or the corporate strategy or, even the pay. They are leaving because of one person,
Just one?
their direct line manager. Bad leadership is actually the #1 cause of voluntary turnover worldwide.
It's staggering when you actually look at the numbers.
It is. And what's truly wild is that if you look at the polling data, 65% of Americans say they would rather change their boss than get a pay raise.
Let that sink in for a second.
I mean, seriously, people would literally rather keep their current salary, just forfeit more money just to get a new manager.
Yeah, they're basically paying to get away from these people.
Exactly. So today we are doing a deep dive into a terrifying reality. If leadership is so incredibly crucial to our daily happiness and, the actual survival of an organization,
Which it is.
right, then why are we so universally, spectacularly bad at picking leaders?
It's the million-dollar question.
And why, statistically speaking, are those bad leaders overwhelmingly men? Okay, let's unpack this.
We really need to start by looking at the mechanics of human perception. And I think it's important to set the baseline here for you listening.
Yeah, definitely.
The objective of looking at this data isn't to just bash men or point fingers.
No, not at all.
It's to examine the rigorous science behind how human beings naturally misjudge potential.
Right.
When you look at the research compiled by Thomas Chamorro Pre-Music, a clear, deeply uncomfortable pattern emerges.
And it is uncomfortable.
Very. The specific personality traits that help someone emerge as a leader, the things that get them noticed, promoted, hired.
The flashy stuff.
Exactly. Those traits are very often the exact opposite of the traits they need to actually do the job effectively.
So we aren't just making small errors in judgment here. We are fundamentally confusing the audition for the actual performance.
That's a great way to put it. There is a massive canyon-sized disconnect between getting the job and doing the job.
I mean, there are two completely different skill sets.
Completely. To understand why this happens, we can look at two distinct archetypes that play out in, almost every corporate environment in the world.
Oh, I love these examples. Let's start with Justine.
Right. So on one side, you have someone like Justine. Let's say she's a senior accountant at a large firm.
Okay.
Justine is highly competent. She keeps her head down. She focuses on operational excellence.
She's doing the actual work.
Exactly. And she only volunteers for high-stakes projects when she's done the math and is absolutely certain she can deliver on her promises.
Which is what you want in an accountant.
Right. But she rarely self-promotes. She doesn't CC the CEO on every minor victory she has.
Yeah, she's doing the heavy lifting. She's making sure the foundation of the house doesn't crack.
Perfect analogy.
But because she isn't running around with a megaphone announcing that the foundation is stable, she just becomes invisible.
Invisible to the people making the promotion decisions, yeah.
And then on the other side, you have the Ryans and the Stewarts.
All right, let's look at Ryan. He's at the same firm. Maybe he even has less actual accounting experience than Justine.
Probably does.
But Ryan possesses this intense interpersonal bravado. In meetings, Ryan speaks louder.
Oh, we all know Ryan.
He comfortably interrupts people, especially women, to claim conversational space. And here is the crucial mechanism. When a client or an executive asks Ryan a highly technical question that he doesn't know the answer to, he doesn't admit a knowledge gap.
He never says, I don't know.
Never.
Yeah.
He skillfully dodges it. He pivots. He says something like, that's an interesting detail, but the real paradigm shift we need to be focusing on is this other thing.
Oh, I've seen that exact move 100 times. It's literally a political debate tactic.
It absolutely is.
Yep.
And to a distracted senior executive who isn't a subject matter expert themselves, Ryan's pivot doesn't look like evasion.
It looks like strategic vision.
Exactly. He sounds like a big picture thinker.
Even though he just completely ignored the question?
Yep. Then you have the steward archetype. Steward is all about public relations. He has a glittering resume. He gives TED Talks.
He has like tens of thousands of followers on LinkedIn.
Right. He speaks entirely in disruptive business buzzwords.
Synergy, paradigm shift, all that.
All of it. But internally, if you actually talk to Steward's team, they are drowning.
Because he's not actually managing them.
He spends all his energy managing his external brand and virtually zero time managing his direct reports.
Wow.
Yet, because Stewart performs superbly in a 2-minute job interview, coming across as highly driven and charismatic, he keeps failing upward into top leadership roles.
That is so frustrating.
The ultimate tragedy of this system is that Ryan and Stewart get the promotions, while Justine is repeatedly passed over for lacking quote-unquote executive presence.
It's like Ryan and Stewart are these spectacular, big-budget movie trailers.
Oh, I like that.
You know, they look amazing in a 2-minute clip. The explosions are massive. The soundtrack is pumping. The editing is totally flawless.
But the movie itself is terrible.
Right. But Justine is the actual 2-hour, critically acclaimed film. She's the real substance.
She's just got a terrible marketing budget.
Exactly. So why do we keep buying tickets to the movie based entirely on the trailer when we all know from painful personal experience that the trailer is usually misleading?
Because the trailer triggers our deepest psychological heuristics. Our mental shortcuts.
We're lazy thinkers.
Basically. We have created a pathological corporate system that inadvertently rewards men for incompetence while punishing women for competence.
That is a brutal sentence.
But it's true. We constantly confuse the ability to manage one's own career success with the ability to manage a team.
And they require completely different skill sets.
Completely different. Managing a career requires self-promotion, networking, taking credit.
Right.
Managing a team requires empathy, self-sacrifice, and giving credit away.
So the skills that get you the job make you terrible at the job.
Exactly. Sigmund Freud actually had a very compelling theory for why we fall for the Ryans and Stewarts of the world.
Wait, Freud, how does psychoanalysis connect to corporate hiring?
It's fascinating, actually. Freud argued that followers project their own repressed narcissism onto a leader.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, in civilized society, most of us have to repress our egos to function, right? We have to be polite, we have to share, we have to follow the rules.
We can't just act like toddlers.
Right. But when we see a leader who exhibits supreme, unashamed self-love, it's intoxicating. We live vicariously through their audacity. Their narcissism is a subliminal form of self-love for the follower.
That is fascinating. So when Ryan refuses to qualify his statements with caveats and just paints the world in bold, absolute strokes, it taps into our subconscious desire for certainty.
We want to believe someone has all the answers.
Meanwhile, when Justine provides a highly accurate, nuanced range of options and admits that the data requires more research...
Which is the honest thing to do.
Right. She isn't giving us that psychological hit of certainty. So we perceive her honesty as a lack of confidence and therefore a lack of competence.
And that leads us to the core of the problem. If you want to understand why that movie trailer looks so good to us, we have to examine a fatal flaw in human perception.
We consistently, dangerously mistake confidence for competence.
Every single time.
Let's look at the actual data on this because the numbers blew my mind. There is a massive meta-analysis spanning over 150 different studies.
It's a huge data set.
Tens of thousands of people. And the scientific reality is that there is less than a 10% overlap between how good people think they are at something and how good they actually are.
Less than 10%.
A 10% overlap. That means 90% of the time, someone's internal booming confidence is telling us absolutely zero about their actual capability.
Zero. Overconfidence is a universal human trait. From an evolutionary standpoint, it actually serves a purpose.
Like survival.
Yeah. If early humans weren't slightly delusional about their chances of survival, they probably wouldn't have left the cave to hunt a mammoth.
That makes sense. I can take that mammoth, no problem.
Exactly. Overconfidence protects our self-esteem and lowers our anxiety. But in a complex modern economy, it makes us terrible judges of reality.
It totally backfires.
Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman has a famous brain teaser that perfectly illustrates how much we blindly trust our flawed instincts over actual logic.
Oh, the bat and the ball puzzle. I love this one.
It's so good. Okay, so a bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
And instantly, my brain, and I'm guessing the brain of everyone listening, just screams, 10 cents.
It feels so right.
The math just feels obvious. The bat is $1, the ball is 10 cents. Boom, there's your $1.10. Kahneman found that even 50% of students at elite institutions like Harvard, Princeton, and MIT confidently blurt out 10 cents.
But if you actually slow down and engage your analytical brain, what Kahneman calls System 2 thinking,
you realize the math doesn't work at all.
it completely falls apart. If the ball costs 10 cents and the bat is exactly $1 more than the ball, then the bat would cost $1.10.
Right. Add them together, and your total is $1.20, not
Yeah,
$1.10.
Exactly. So the correct answer has to be 5 cents.
The ball is 5 cents. The bat is $1 more, making it $1.05. $1.05 plus 5 cents equals $1.10.
It's basic arithmetic.
But our initial, incredibly confident gut reaction is completely wrong.
The profound point Kahneman is making here isn't about math skills. It's about cognitive laziness.
We just don't want to do the work.
We are so incredibly confident in our initial intuition that we don't even bother to double-check our logic.
Wow.
And if we refuse to check our logic on a simple arithmetic puzzle, we certainly aren't checking it when evaluating incredibly complex social dynamics.
Like whether someone has the psychological fortitude to lead a division of 500 people.
Right, we just look at their confidence and say, yep, 10 cents, they're a leader.
That is so scary. And this overconfidence bleeds into absolutely everything we do. My favorite example from the deep dive sources is driving.
Oh, the driving stats are hilarious.
The polling shows that 79% of men and 68% of women consider themselves to be better than average drivers.
Which, just by the fundamental laws of mathematics, is a statistical impossibility.
We cannot all be better than average.
No, we cannot. But look closely at those numbers. While both men and women suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we overrate our abilities.
Men are 11 percentage points more overconfident than women when it comes to driving.
And this gender gap in delusion appears everywhere.
Literally everywhere.
In studies involving complex math tasks, men routinely overestimated their actual performance by about 30%.
30%.
While women only overrated themselves by 15%.
So the obvious question here is why? Why are men statistically so much more overconfident? Is it biological?
The most robust explanation is sociological. Men generally navigate a world where their flaws are frequently forgiven, their mistakes are minimized, and their strengths are magnified.
So they're getting a different set of feedback from the world.
Exactly. Overconfidence is the natural psychological byproduct of privilege.
Ah, that makes sense.
It is incredibly difficult to see your own flaws accurately when the society around you constantly affirms and inflates your self-view.
Right. When a man is aggressive, he's taking charge.
Yep.
When he makes a risky decision that completely fails, he's a bold risk taker who learned a hard lesson. The feedback loop just constantly feeds the ego.
This dismantles a massive narrative in the corporate world. We have an entire cottage industry of self-help books and seminars built around what's called the female fallacy.
Oh, yeah, the whole lean-in culture.
Right. The prevailing narrative is that the reason we don't have parity in the C-suite is because women just naturally lack internal confidence.
We tell them they suffer from imposter syndrome.
We say if they would just lean in more, speak louder, take up more space, they would become leaders.
But the data says that's a complete misdiagnosis of the problem.
It's worse than misdiagnosis. It's victim blaming.
Wow.
The idea that women inherently lack internal confidence is a statistical myth. There is massive research analyzing hundreds of studies on self-esteem across the lifespan.
And what did they find?
While there are noticeable differences in confidence levels during early adolescence, by the time men and women reach the age of 23,
23, okay.
the differences in their internal baseline confidence become mathematically negligible.
So they feel the exact same level of confidence inside.
Yes, the core issue is not how women feel internally. The issue is how their confidence is treated externally by the rest of us.
It's a brutal double bind. It's a total lose-lose situation.
Completely. If a woman displays the exact same high-octane, unapologetic confidence as a man, she violates deeply ingrained gender stereotypes.
Right, the social penalty is severe.
She is routinely perceived as aggressive, cold, bossy, or just unlikable. People will say, she's competent, but her elbows are too sharp.
I've literally heard that phrase used.
But if she accurately reads that room and modulates her behavior,
If she hedges her bets, builds consensus, ensures she is 110% certain of the data before she speaks so her ideas aren't immediately shut down,
then she's deemed unleader-like, timid, lacking in executive presence.
it's maddening. Think about your own office dynamics, for the people listening. Women are interrupted significantly more frequently in meetings than men.
Much more frequently.
Their mistakes are judged much more harshly and remembered for far longer. So when a woman acts cautiously in a meeting, she isn't displaying some sort of innate lack of internal confidence. She is displaying a highly rational, intelligent adaptation to a deeply biased environment.
Which means the standard self-help advice we give women to fake it till you make it, to puff out their chests and project unearned swagger.
It's actually incredibly destructive.
Because we were essentially telling them to adopt the toxic traits of bad leaders.
Oh, wow.
When we tell women to fake it till they make it, we are literally asking them to emulate the maladaptive behaviors of incompetent men.
We are telling them to prioritize the trailer over the movie.
We shouldn't be lowering the behavioral standards for women to match the bluster of men. We need to drastically raise the standards for men to match the actual, verifiable competence we already demand of women.
I want to ground this in everyday reality. Think about a time you've hired a professional based purely on their unshakable confidence.
Oh, we've all done it.
Maybe it was a contractor fixing your house who said, "Oh yeah, I can knock this out in a weekend, no problem."
Famous last words.
Or a financial advisor who promised you double-digit returns without a second of hesitation. And then they turned out to be a complete disaster.
But the contractor leaves your plumbing in ruins.
The advisor loses your savings. When a highly competent person lacks confidence, what do?
They prepare obsessively.
They act with extreme caution. They mitigate every possible risk. But when a highly confident person lacks actual competence, they have no fallback plan.
Their only play is to hide their incompetence behind a wall of bluster and denial.
Competence must always, always trump competence.
Which brings us to a much darker consequence of our broken radar.
Okay, let's go there.
If mistaking confidence for competence is the entry-level problem, what happens when that overconfidence is pushed to the absolute psychological extreme?
It gets worse than just arrogance.
Much worse. We move past mere arrogance into the realm of truly toxic, destructive personality traits that are inexplicably celebrated in modern business.
We are talking about the dark triad.
Specifically, narcissism and psychopathy, and how they are constantly masked by the illusion of charisma.
Let's tear down the charisma myth. Because in business media, we treat charisma like it's a superpower.
We really do.
It's framed as this mystical, innate trait that great leaders are just born with. But the research suggests charisma isn't a trait at all. It's a localized illusion.
It is entirely an illusion created by the audience. Cross-cultural studies spanning over 60 countries have found that charisma is universally viewed as a key ingredient of leadership.
Everybody wants a charismatic boss.
Everybody. Yet, objective longitudinal analysis shows that a leader's perceived charisma is a terrible predictor of their team's actual performance or the company's financial health.
Wait, really? It doesn't correlate to success at all?
Not at all. Charisma acts as a cognitive fog. It clouds our ability to evaluate someone objectively.
It's like a Jedi mind trick.
Sort of. If we perceive a leader as charismatic, we give them an incredibly wide berth. We forgive their missed deadlines, we excuse their temper tantrums, and we overlook their massive strategic failures.
Because to admit they are failing is to admit that we were conned. We have to admit our own judgment was wrong, and our egos won't allow that.
Precisely. And this is where the real danger lies. Charismatic signals, the intense eye contact, the grand visionary rhetoric, the supreme self-assurance.
Yeah.
They are frequently hijacked by individuals who are highly motivated to benefit themselves at the profound expense of the group.
Enter the narcissists and the psychopaths.
Right.
The data shows that these dark triad personalities over-index in leadership roles. They are vastly overrepresented in the C-suite compared to the general population.
And it makes sense when you think about it.
They are master impression managers.
They absolutely crush job interviews because they don't experience the normal human anxiety associated with lying or wildly exaggerating their accomplishments.
They have zero compunction about taking credit for a junior employee's late-night hustle.
We need to define these terms clearly, though, because they get thrown around a lot in popular culture.
Good idea. Let's start with narcissists.
In a clinical and psychological context, narcissists are profoundly self-absorbed. They feel a deep sense of entitlement and are obsessed with their own image and legacy.
So they emerge as leaders because they spend a massive, disproportionate amount of their cognitive energy worrying about how they appear to others.
Exactly. Psychopaths are slightly different and rarer, making up maybe 1% of the general population.
But they still end up in charge.
Oh, yeah. Psychopathy in the corporate world is characterized by extreme recklessness, a constant need for stimulation, greed, and a complete lack of effective empathy or moral constraint.
They just don't care who they hurt.
They are fearless, and they are highly skilled at interpersonal deception. Both of these profiles are incredibly destructive to the long-term health of any organization.
The real-world examples of this are chilling, but we often learn the wrong lessons from them. Take the Steve Jobs paradox.
Classic example.
The business world worships Steve Jobs. People look at the black turtlenecks, the famous reality distortion field, his notoriously abrasive personality, his habit of berating employees.
And they conclude that his toxic traits were the secret ingredient to his genius.
Right, they think, to build the iPhone, you have to be a tyrant.
Which is a massive logical fallacy. We are generalizing from a highly unrepresentative 1 in a billion example.
The reality is that Steve Jobs succeeded despite his deep personality flaws, not because of them.
He happened to be a generational visionary when it came to consumer product design, and that sheer brilliance allowed him to survive his own interpersonal defects.
But most abrasive, narcissistic leaders aren't hiding a secret iPhone in their back pocket.
No, they aren't Steve Jobs. They're just abrasive.
Assuming that being difficult makes you a genius is like assuming that wearing a black turtleneck makes you a billionaire.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
And when we look at corporate psychopathy, the ultimate cautionary tale is Bernie Madoff.
Oh, Madoff. He orchestrated a $65 billion Ponzi scheme.
But how did he get away with it for decades? He used superficial charm. He wore what psychologists call the mask of sanity.
He was the non-executive chairman of the NASDAQ. He sat on the board's prestigious charities. He seemed like the ultimate trustworthy insider.
But he was weaponizing his charisma to exploit the trust of his followers.
You see the exact same dynamic with someone like Harvey Weinstein, a brilliant, undeniable talent in film production who used his immense institutional power, his narcissism, and his intimidation tactics to mask decades of horrific abuse.
And we also see this phenomenon play out continuously on the global political stage, regardless of your ideological leanings.
Right, and just to be clear for the listeners, we are looking at this purely through the lens of psychological mechanics, not taking a political stance.
Exactly. When political scientists and psychologists analyze figures like Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, or George W. Bush, they serve as textbook examples of how charisma, polarization, and perception operate at scale.
Because a voter's evaluation of a politician's policy performance is often entirely downstream of how charismatic they perceive that politician to be.
Charisma creates a reality distortion field. A famous advisor in the Bush administration once reportedly mocked a journalist who was part of the, quote, reality-based community, stating that they were an empire now, and when they acted, they created their own reality.
That is the ultimate expression of the charisma myth. It shields leaders from objective, data-driven criticism.
But the reality always catches up eventually. Charisma might be an incredible acquisition strategy, but it's a terrible retention strategy.
It's like an organizational sugar rush.
Perfect way to describe it.
A highly charismatic leader comes in, they give a rousing speech, the team gets totally hyped up, the stock price might even bump on the news.
But it inevitably leads to a massive, painful crash.
The term for that is the honeymoon period, right?
Yes. Narcissistic and psychopathic leaders might project an aura of rapid success that attracts venture capital or energizes a base. But the long-term costs of their leadership are absolutely devastating.
Let's talk about those costs, because there was a fascinating study that analyzed data from 50,000 employees across 11 different firms.
They wanted to quantify the financial impact of employee behavior.
And what they found is insane. They found that identifying and removing a single toxic worker provides a financial benefit to the company that is 4 times greater than hiring a top 1% superstar employee.
4 times greater.
Wait, I really want to break down the math on that. How is firing one bad person 4 times more valuable than hiring the Michael Jordan of accounting?
Comes down to the concept of the blast radius.
The blast radius.
Yeah. A superstar employee is additive. They increase their own output, they might hit all their KPIs, and maybe they inspire the person sitting next to them to work a little harder.
Okay, so they're a net positive.
But their impact is relatively localized. A toxic worker, on the other hand, creates exponential damage. They don't just lower their own productivity, they destroy the productivity of everyone around them. They cause your actual high performers to quit in frustration.
They steal credit, which destroys team trust.
They create massive legal and HR liabilities. And they force other managers to waste hundreds of hours resolving the interpersonal conflicts they generate.
Now that math is just for a toxic employee. Imagine the exponential catastrophic damage caused when that toxic person is the CEO.
Setting the culture for 10,000 people.
Narcissistic leaders push for extravagant, high-risk mergers and acquisitions with terrible ROI just to feed their egos.
They engage in fraud to cover their failures. They hollow out the company from the inside.
I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Is charisma always a bad thing? Like, can't a leader be highly charismatic and highly competent? Do they have to be mutually exclusive?
They aren't mutually exclusive, no, but the data points to a very distinct too much of a good thing effect.
Okay.
A major study out of Ghent University mapped out leadership effectiveness against charisma. They found an inverted U-shaped curve.
It's a bell curve, basically.
Right. Moderate charisma is actually quite helpful. It helps a leader communicate a strategic vision and persuade stakeholders.
But once charisma crosses a certain threshold into the high category,
Leadership effectiveness plummets. Highly charismatic leaders are often terrible at tactical execution. They hate the boring, granular work of organizing, creating efficiencies, and follow-through.
they want to be on stage, not in the weeds.
Exactly. If you look at truly effective, high-performing leaders on the global stage, they often look very different from the charismatic ideal.
Look at Angela Merkel.
Yes. For years, she was the de facto leader of the European Union and one of the most powerful people on earth.
Yet, she lived a remarkably unassuming life. She was free of scandal. Pundits often described her as discreet, cautious, and even boring.
But her focus was relentlessly on tactical execution, consensus building, and the stability of her team rather than self-promotion.
That is the perfect pivot point for us. We spent a lot of time deconstructing the toxic, heavily male-skewed traits we currently use to hire. You know, the overconfidence, the dark triad traits masked by charisma. If our internal radar is this broken, we need to look at what actual data-backed leadership effectiveness looks like. And this leads us directly to the female advantage and the power of emotional intelligence.
When we stop measuring who simply gets promoted and start strictly measuring actual objective leadership effectiveness on the job,
The data becomes overwhelmingly clear. Women, on average, outperform men.
Alice Eagley, a prominent psychologist, conducted a massive review of 45 separate studies on leadership.
And the consensus was that female leaders are more able to drive positive, systemic change within an organization.
They elicit significantly more respect from their subordinates. They communicate vision more effectively.
They empower their teams rather than micromanaging them, and they approach complex problem solving with much more cognitive flexibility.
The numbers back this up across multiple methodologies. There was a study by Herminia Ibarra and Otilia Obadaru that analyzed thousands of 360-degree assessments.
And for anyone who hasn't been through one, a 360 assessment isn't just your boss giving you an annual review.
No, it's a comprehensive psychological map. You are evaluated by your peers, by the people who report directly to you, by your superiors, and sometimes even by clients.
It measures how you actually behave in every direction. And in these assessments, women outperformed men on 9 out of 10 leadership dimensions.
9 out of 10. That is a statistical landslide.
It really is. And what's amazing is the single dimension where men actually scored higher. It was on envisioning, the ability to project a grand strategic vision.
But here is the massive caveat. Men only scored higher on envisioning when they were being rated by other men.
When women rated men, that advantage disappeared entirely.
It perfectly highlights the systemic, self-replicating bias we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
but it also underscores an undeniable baseline of capability.
And there is a profound, almost tragic irony here when you look at how the tech industry, for example, has historically tried to justify its gender imbalance.
Oh, the Google memo.
Yes. A few years ago, there was the infamous James Damore Google memo. He wrote a widely circulated internal document arguing against Google's diversity programs.
His core thesis, drawing on some cherry-picked evolutionary psychology, was that men and women have different average interests.
Specifically, that women are generally more interested in people, while men are generally more interested in things or systems.
He used this to justify why there were fewer female software engineers.
Right. And the staggering irony of that argument, as the research points out, is that leadership is entirely 100% about managing people.
It has nothing to do with things.
Exactly. If you are a senior engineering manager, you aren't writing code anymore. You are managing the humans who write the code.
So by Damore's own logic, if women are naturally more attuned to people and social dynamics, they are mathematically better suited for leadership roles than men.
It totally backfires on him. The fundamental currency of effective leadership isn't IQ, it is EQ, emotional intelligence.
While IQ measures your cognitive capacity for logic and pattern recognition, EQ measures your self-awareness, your empathy, your emotional self-regulation, and your social skills.
EQ is the ultimate proven antidote to the dark triad.
Leaders with high EQ do not throw temper tantrums when a project goes sideways. They're less likely to be excitable, moody, or irritable.
They have the ability to manage their own internal state, which is an absolute prerequisite for managing the internal states of a team.
And decades of psychometric testing reliably show that women, on average, score higher on EQ assessments.
And this EQ advantage translates directly into how they manage day to day. The literature contrasts two styles: transformational leadership versus laissez-faire leadership.
Women heavily index toward transformational leadership,
They act as actual role models. They spend time mentoring junior staff, they engage their teams emotionally, and provide a sense of meaning to the work,
while men are statistically much more prone to laissez-faire leadership.
which is basically the absent manager syndrome.
Yes, laissez-faire leaders are hands-off to a fault. They only intervene when something is literally on fire.
They don't provide regular feedback, they don't mentor, and they leave their employees drifting in ambiguity.
And organizational psychology tells us that ambiguity and lack of feedback lead directly to chronic stress, burnout, and massive employee disengagement.
So we circle back to the ultimate catch-22. If women possess higher EQ, lean toward transformational leadership, and are empirically better leaders on 9 out of 10 dimensions, why are there so few of them at the top of the Fortune 500?
Because the system is actively filtering them out. We talked about the bias where they have to be 110% sure to speak up. But look at the career trajectory data.
It's depressing.
Female CEOs in the Fortune 1000 take, on average, 30% longer to reach the top than their male counterparts.
They have to jump through significantly more hoops, prove themselves in more diverse roles, and overcome constant skepticism.
And critically, when companies do try to fix this, their diversity programs often fail completely.
Why?
Because the programs are designed to teach women to emulate the broken, toxic male model. They send women to assertiveness training. They teach them to lean in to overconfidence. Instead of valuing the natural EQ advantages women bring, the system demands they become more like Ryan and Stewart.
Let's play this out. Suppose a company finally wakes up, they look at all this data, they realize their culture is a toxic nightmare, and they suddenly decide to put a woman or a highly empathetic male leader in charge to fix it.
We saw a version of this with Uber.
Yes. Travis Kalanick, the founder, created a notoriously ruthless, abrasive tech bro culture that eventually resulted in massive scandals.
The board forces him out, and they bring in Dara Khosrowshahi.
Now, Dara is a man, but business analysts explicitly noted he was hired for his quote-unquote feminine leadership qualities. His diplomacy, his high empathy, his ability to apologize, negotiate, and calm the waters.
But if organizations only turn to high EQ leaders when the house is completely engulfed in flames, aren't we just handing these leaders the keys to sinking ships?
You were describing the glass cliff phenomenon?
It is a well-documented reality. Organizations heavily biased toward male archetypes will often reserve top leadership roles for women or highly collaborative men only during times of existential crisis.
When the risk of failure is at its absolute highest, and the previous charismatic leader has left the company in ruins, suddenly they want a transformational leader to clean up the mess.
While it is certainly a testament to their crisis management and consensus-building abilities, it sets them up for disproportionate failure.
The core recommendation from the research here is that high EQ transformational leadership shouldn't be an emergency glass break measure. It needs to be the foundational blueprint for leadership selection from day one when the company is actually healthy.
So if our internal radar is this broken, and our gut instinct is actively sabotaging us by pushing us toward confident narcissists, how on earth do we actually hire someone?
We need a completely new framework. And that brings us to the first major systemic recommendation: building the ultimate leader using what the research calls the 3 capitals.
If we are going to remove human bias from the equation, we need a scientifically defensible, objective model of what potential actually looks like. We have to discard charisma and executive presence.
Throw them out.
The text breaks human potential down into 3 distinct measurable buckets: intellectual capital, social capital, and psychological capital.
Let's start with intellectual capital. This is domain-specific expertise. It's not just having a high general IQ, it's knowing the actual nuts and bolts of the job.
There is a fascinating study by Amanda Goodall that looked at healthcare. She found that hospitals run by actual practicing physicians consistently have better patient outcomes than hospitals run by professional business administrators.
Which makes intuitive sense.
The same logic applies everywhere. Formula One racing teams run by former drivers win more races. Basketball teams managed by former elite players perform better. You need the technical chops to have genuine credibility with your team.
If you don't understand the work, you can't evaluate the work.
That is entirely true. But intellectual capital is where most companies make their fatal error. They assume it's the only capital that matters.
They look their best, most brilliant software engineer, and they promote them to engineering manager, assuming that past performance in a technical role will automatically translate to leadership.
And it rarely does. Being a great coder requires closing your door and focusing on a screen. Being a great manager requires opening your door and focusing on people.
That is why you need the second bucket, social capital.
Social capital isn't just about being a nepotism hire or having a lot of golf buddies in the C-suite.
No, it's about network centrality. It's a measure of how deeply and widely connected you are across the silos of an organization.
A leader's success depends almost entirely on their ability to influence others without using formal authority.
If you need marketing to change a campaign to help your engineering team, you can't just order them to do it. You have to persuade them. Influence requires a strong, diverse, cross-functional network built on mutual trust.
But even if you are incredibly smart and you know everyone in the building, it can still fall apart if you don't have the final, most critical piece, psychological capital.
If I'm understanding this correctly, we can use a computer metaphor here.
Let's hear it.
Intellectual capital is the app. It's your accounting software or your engineering program. Social capital is the internet connection.
Okay.
But psychological capital is the core operating system. It's iOS, it's Windows. If the underlying operating system is fundamentally unstable, it doesn't matter how beautifully coded the accounting app is or how fast the internet is. The whole phone is going to crash under pressure.
That is a brilliant analogy. Psychological capital dictates how you will use your intelligence and your network. Psychologists break it down into 3 dimensions: the bright side, the dark side, and the inside.
Let's break those down.
The bright side is what we see when you're at your absolute best. It's your natural curiosity, your emotional stability, your extroversion, your ambition. It's how you perform when you are well-rested and happy.
But leadership is rarely about being well-rested and happy.
Exactly. Which is why the dark side is so vital to measure. The dark side consists of your derailment traits. It's what happens when you are under extreme stress, fatigued, or when you let your guard down.
Does your attention to detail curdle into paralyzing micromanagement?
Does your bold confidence curdle into arrogant hubris? Does your emotional stability mask a complete lack of empathy?
And finally, the inside. The inside is your core values. It's your moral compass, your underlying motivations, and how well those align with the specific culture of the organization.
The alignment piece is crucial because leadership isn't a universal superpower. It's highly contextual. The definition used in the research is that talent is simply personality in the right place.
You can be an incredible leader in one environment and an absolute catastrophe in another. Look at Winston Churchill.
Churchill is the ultimate case study in contextual leadership.
During World War II, Churchill was brilliant. He was indispensable. His personality traits, his deep paranoia, his extreme stubbornness, his absolute uncompromising refusal to negotiate or see the other side's point of view.
Those were the exact psychological traits Britain needed to survive the Blitz. He held the country together through sheer force of will.
But the moment the war ended and peacetime began, what happened?
He was immediately voted out of office.
Because in a peacetime government, which requires rebuilding an economy, forming complex diplomatic alliances, and building consensus across the aisle, extreme stubbornness and paranoia are no longer assets.
They are massive liabilities. His psychological capital didn't change at all, but the context shifted around him, turning his strengths into weaknesses.
There are countless examples of this. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper early in his career because his editor said he lacked imagination and had no good ideas.
Oprah Winfrey was fired from a local news anchor job because she was deemed too emotionally invested in her stories.
They were brilliant, but they were in the wrong context for their specific psychological capital.
If you take a highly methodical, tradition-valuing leader and drop them into a fast-moving, break-things tech startup, they will fail. If you take a highly empathetic, altruistic leader and put them in charge of a cutthroat, purely profit-driven investment bank desk, they will burn out instantly.
You have to match the operating system to the environment.
So this brings up the age-old question of nature versus nurture. If my operating system is naturally introverted, or I naturally lack emotional regulation, am I just doomed? Can people actually level up their psychological capital, or are we permanently stuck with whatever traits we rolled at birth?
It's a mix of both, but we have hard data on the ratio. There were massive longitudinal studies conducted by AT&T starting in the 1970s, which tracked managers over decades combined with modern behavioral genetics.
The consensus is that about 50% of leadership success is tied to innate personality traits. Your genetics, your neurobiology, your early childhood development, that is your nature. You can't change it.
But that leaves a massive 50% that is highly malleable. It can be shaped by nurture, by experience, by environment, and by deliberate, targeted coaching.
You aren't entirely stuck,
Yeah.
but you have to know exactly what cards you are holding if you want to play the hand effectively.
But to even begin playing that hand, organizations have to radically change how they hire. Having this elegant blueprint of the three capitals is completely useless if the bouncer at the door of the company is still relying on their gut instinct.
And that brings us to the final and perhaps most difficult recommendation. Fixing the system by prioritizing data over gut instinct.
The absolute first step for any organization is admitting that their intuition is broken. We have spent an hour establishing that human instinct is deeply, predictably flawed.
Yet surveys show that over 75% of HR leaders admit that the most common method they use for identifying high potential leaders is the subjective opinion of a single boss.
And the main vehicle for delivering that subjective opinion is the unstructured job interview.
Ah, the unstructured interview. The classic, let's just grab a coffee, have a chat, and see if we click approach.
It is the single most destructive practice in corporate hiring. Unstructured interviews are essentially useless for predicting job performance.
Why? Because they are nothing but a breeding ground for cognitive heuristics and biases. A researcher named Iris Bonnet at Harvard has done incredible work on this.
She found that when interviewers evaluate candidates one by one in an unstructured conversational format, they rely entirely on pattern matching.
They look for someone who reminds them of themselves. They unconsciously activate gender and racial biases.
They assume a confident man is ambitious, while a confident woman is aggressive.
They hire for culture fit, which is usually just a coded term for somebody I'd like to have a beer with.
So how do we strip the bias out?
We have to mechanize the process.
Yeah.
We must implement strictly structured interviews. This means every single candidate is asked the exact same questions in the exact same order by a diverse panel.
And their answers are scored in real time against a predefined objective rubric.
You evaluate candidates side by side, comparing their answers to question 4 horizontally, rather than evaluating the whole person vertically. This forces the brain into System 2 analytical thinking and dramatically reduces bias.
But even a structured interview is still relying on what the candidate says they will do. If we really want to measure psychological capital, we have to use psychometrics.
Exactly. Validated scientific psychometric testing is non-negotiable. Tests like the Hogan Development Survey have profiled millions of working adults.
They are specifically designed to bypass self-reporting biases and identify those dark side derailers before you hire someone.
They look for traits like excitable, which means you have volatile mood swings, or skeptical, which means you are highly cynical and distrusting of your team.
Or bold, which initially looks like confidence but under stress reveals an inability to admit mistakes or take advice.
And companies are pushing the boundaries even further with passive data collection, which is fascinating. Instead of asking people to take a test, they are using algorithms to analyze digital footprints to measure social capital.
There are companies like Humanize that create smart employee ID badges. These badges track how often employees move around the office, who they talk to, their tone of voice, and even physiological stress responses.
Obviously, there are massive privacy considerations here, but from a pure data perspective, it maps out the actual hidden networks of influence in a company.
They use email network analysis to see who is actually acting as a central hub of information flow, rather than just looking at a static org chart.
The algorithm doesn't care if you're a man or a woman, an extrovert or an introvert. It just measures your actual structural value to the team.
And that data is invaluable, but hiring the right person is only half the battle. If we want to capture that 50% of potential that is coachable, we have to look at the realities of leadership development.
And this requires slaughtering one of the most sacred cows in modern HR strengths-based coaching.
This is huge. Gallup's Strength Finder test is practically a religion in corporate America. Millions of employees have taken it.
The entire philosophy is built on the idea of positive psychology. Don't waste time trying to fix your weaknesses. Just discover what you are naturally good at and focus all your energy on making those strengths even stronger.
It feels great. It's incredibly affirming.
And the clinical research indicates it is deeply, dangerously flawed advice for leaders. If you only focus on what you are already good at, you are ignoring your limitations at your own extreme peril.
Positive feedback feels good, but negative feedback is actually the most useful type of information a human being can receive.
Negative feedback highlights the specific, actionable gap between where you currently are and where you need to be to succeed. Furthermore, the strengths-based philosophy ignores a core psychological reality. Taking a strength to the extreme automatically turns it into a weakness.
Right. If your core strength is attention to detail and you just lean into that relentlessly, you eventually become a paralyzing micromanager who won't let your team breathe.
If your core strength is decisiveness and you push it to the extreme, you become a tyrant who refuses to consult experts.
So the absolute cornerstone of any actual leadership development is brutal self-awareness. You have to close the gap between how you perceive yourself and how the rest of the world experiences you.
Think about the character of Michael Scott from the show The Office, or David Brent in the UK version.
The entire comedic engine of that show relies on a boss who has literally zero self-awareness about how his actions land with his team.
He thinks he is a beloved entertainer and a philosophical genius. His team thinks he is an unbearable buffoon.
So if you want to improve, you don't need to go on an expensive executive retreat to find your inner strength. You just need to pay very close attention to how other people react when you enter a room.
But here we hit the ultimate paradox of coaching. The people who need coaching the absolute most, the highly narcissistic, the severely overconfident, the Ryans and Stewarts.
They are psychologically the least likely to accept it. Their egos have built massive defense mechanisms. They are essentially immune to negative feedback.
If a project fails, they blame market conditions or incompetent subordinates. If a project succeeds, they claim sole credit.
So we have this massive mountain of empirical data. We know our instincts are terrible. We know overconfidence is a trap. We know the dark triad destroys value. We know women, statistically, lead more effectively. And we know we need structured, objective, psychometric data.
But knowing all this, how do we actually convince powerful people to change? How do we convince a CEO or a board of directors, people whose entire identities are wrapped up in their own perceived brilliance, to hand over their decision-making power to algorithms and structured matrices?
It requires a fundamental, painful shift in organizational culture, and it has to be driven by the board. We have to stop viewing a leadership title as a reward for individual career hustle.
Leadership is not a prize for being the best salesperson. Leadership is a highly specific resource deployed for the benefit of the team.
Boards must start measuring leadership impact objectively. They need to tie executive compensation not just to quarterly profits, but to 360-degree assessment scores, team retention rates, and the diversity of their succession pipelines.
Ultimately, the market will force this change. If an organization genuinely wants to survive the next 20 years, they will have to adopt data-driven methods, because the financial bleed caused by toxic, incompetent leadership is simply too high to sustain in a hyper-competitive global economy.
I want you to think about your own career for a second. If you want to break the cycle of overconfidence in your own life, do something incredibly uncomfortable this week. Actively solicit negative feedback.
Ask a peer or a subordinate, what is one thing I do that makes your job harder?
Our egos absolutely hate this. It will trigger your fight or flight response. But it is the fastest, most effective way to bypass your own blind spots, build genuine self-awareness, and actually grow your psychological capital.
That is the perfect practical application. Self-awareness is the key that unlocks everything else.
Let's briefly recap the massive journey we've been on today. We started by exploring the dangerous disconnect between the loud, self-promoting traits that help someone emerge as a leader and the quiet, empathetic traits required to actually be effective.
We walked through how our brains naturally fall for the confidence illusion, confusing Ryan's political bluster with competence while ignoring Justine's verifiable capability.
We tore down the charisma myth, exposing how it acts as a smokescreen for narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies, which create immense blast radiuses of toxic culture and financial ruin.
We then looked at the undeniable, data-backed female advantage, which is deeply rooted in emotional intelligence and transformational leadership.
And finally, we mapped out the path forward. We have to build leaders based on intellectual, social, and psychological capital, and we absolutely must abandon our broken gut instincts in favor of strictly structured, data-driven selection processes.
The overarching call to action is a total paradigm shift. We have to stop trying to solve the gender gap by sending women to assertiveness training to emulate incompetent men.
We should never lower our standards for women. We must radically raise the behavioral standards we apply to men.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
We are rapidly entering an era where artificial intelligence and machine learning are taking over the core intellectual puzzles of business.
AI can now manage massive data sets, optimize supply chains, write code, and generate strategic forecasts faster and more accurately than any human.
The analytical hard skills of leadership are becoming fully commoditized. If a machine can do the math and the strategy, then the only unique value proposition left for human leaders is managing people, managing complex emotions, and cultivating psychological safety.
In a fully AI-integrated future, will the hyper-confident, emotionally detached, highly aggressive male leadership archetype not just be bad for business? Will it be entirely functionally obsolete?
Think about that next time you sit in a meeting and watch someone talk over the smartest person in the room.
The future of leadership isn't algorithmic, it's inherently emotional. Those who adapt to that reality will thrive, and those who cling to the outdated dominant archetypes will simply be replaced.
We started this deep dive talking about buying $1 million machine. When we buy hardware, we run diagnostics, we check the specs, and we trust the data. But when evaluating human potential, we've treated it like magic. We've been flying blind, assuming the loudest voice is the smartest. It's time to turn on the instruments, look at the actual data, and demand better from our leaders and from ourselves. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking for the data, and we'll see you next time.